The reason I do a drawing is the shark in downtown Kaluakona, Hawaii. Paint is pretty doggone thick. Little Bob Ross action, so I maximize his shape dancing. Man, good night, it was awesome. This art project was so much fun. I want it to be kind of a round wooden eyelid. I like to mix my own paint. Yeah, he's wooden, but he's alive. You kind of feel a little crazy, but come on, let loose, have some fun. Thinned it too much, or when the session is all done, the distortion that you're looking through, and look, the fronds to all be different. I want them to be unique. Practice makes better, a little bit better. Just barely touching my canvas. And there's my reference photo. And guess what? It's starting to resemble this same consistency of fainted, pour a little bit on those edges, and I let gravity. Paint is therapy, and the therapist is the art. Stay tuned, enjoy the video. Hey, you gotta see this. Did you know if you went to MikeQuist.com right now, you can see all the art I create, including the lava tiki. Right now I have really low prices. Did you know you can get one of my prints for as little as $4? I also have frame prints and cell phone cases and canvas wraps, mugs, pillows. I have bags, I have metal prints, which are my favorite. Go to MikeQuist.com and check it out right now. Hey, what's up? I'm Mike Quist. Welcome. I'm gonna do a tutorial today at how I prep and prepare and paint one of my projects. I love using skate decks, which these are, and paint something really cool. Right now I'm in the tropical Hawaii collection. So I found this board on Amazon and I got a really good price on it. And what a cool canvas, right? My kids are way into skating. I actually built a half pipe for them. And I've been trying to drop in on that half pipe and it has not been very successful. I've been getting bruised and bumped and scraped. But in this video, I'm gonna show you right now how I prep a piece of wood to create a canvas. Now you could do this on MDF, you could do it on plywood, you could prep boards, you can paint. All right, so pro tip, I like to do a drawing prior to actually getting to the easel. The reason I do a drawing is to, make all of my mistakes and well, some of my mistakes, and a lot of the planning and preparing of a piece or the main subject of a piece I can erase and just get his look right. This is a tiki that I did, and you can see I transferred his image onto this board, but then I put him on some coral. He's holding some leis, I got some torches there, and then of course I added the shark. I love this surfboard. And the City of Refuge, same thing. I drew out that tiki, drew out some of those components, but pre-draw, and then you have a really good sketch as your reference that you can reproduce right there on your canvas. So let's attach the canvas to the easel, and I just used some pocket screws, a drill, and some redneck ingenuity. Let's get started. This is the first time I'm actually using one of these boards I bought off of Amazon as a canvas. I find it crazy at some of the art stores what they charge for good quality canvases. So I would consider this a deal. Plus, it really gives you something that sets you apart from maybe your competition. So if you're doing art fairs, craft shows, galleries, consider what substrate you're painting on, and maybe that sets you apart. Like surfboards out here in Hawaii do really well. What is it in your area that you could paint? I saw a guy who actually goes around and buys old art, and then he adds images and upgrades the images from the thrift store art, where maybe it's a ship and now an octopus or a giant squid is enveloping the ship. Turns these things really cool and makes them really valuable. Pro tips all the way around. All right, what I'm gonna do is just sand this with 220 grit so that I create good adhesion with my paint. And then I'm gonna go ahead and paint it black as my backdrop. I like black as my canvas for some of this art that I do. Sometimes I use white as well, but today we're gonna do a black canvas. All right, I'm just gonna use some isopropyl alcohol and some rags to wipe the dust off that skate deck. Boy, that made this deck actually really smooth. It had been lacquered but when you sand that lacquer, it's like, man, it's just really baby soft smooth. So might be a pro tip on getting a really good canvas ready. All right, let's get some black on this thing. I'm gonna block some of the light so the light doesn't blow out the camera. I use these screws when I'm building cabinets and different things in my shop. They use a square drive, okay? So this is a square drive on my drill, and I like that because they don't strip out. I use them over and over again. So I'm just using the same screws all the time. They got a nice head to capture this board without damaging it or drilling through the canvas. Man, 2 screws alone does a really good job. We'll just do one more there on the bottom and we are ready to go. Something I like to do is just take masking tape and I mask off the bottom part of my shop-made easel here. The reason I do that is so that I could use this as my palette, and then when that dries up, I could just pull that and put new tape down without having to do any cleaning. I hate cleaning palettes. Do I have anybody else that feels the same way? I have so many palettes that paint just dried hard on, and I just hate cleaning them. Let me know, guys, are you interested in learning how I made my shop-made, homemade easel here? I actually made this stick here for balancing so I could grab my hand and not sit here and hold my wrist, you know, so I could put that on either side, or when I have a regular square canvas, it'll just go right between this. But this is good for doing skateboards as well. So I made this little easel. If you're interested in learning how to make one, I made it out of scrap wood, and it was actually really easy to make if you're handy with the saw, which I'm sure you are, because you're watching. You ever feel like you're going crazy? I'm out here in my shop talking to myself, hoping that you guys are watching. All right, I'll just take the end of these here and just kind of bundle them up so they don't stick to my table if I try to move my easel. I'm gonna test out, you know, I got this kind of as a gesso, but more like just a regular acrylic paint. Got it at the paint store. This was really expensive. It was $23, $22.89. They're proud of their paint. So let's see why it's any better than other stuff I've been using. Something I like to do on this channel, and what I anticipate doing is product reviews and trying to teach how to create art without breaking the bank. Because if you're like me, I'm an artist. I want people to buy my art. I want to become a successful artist. I just got put into a really cool gallery down in downtown Kona, Hawaii, and I'm really proud of that. But I'm not wanting to spend a bunch of money to create art. I want to make some money. Really, art. I want it to last. I want it to be durable. But 16.9 ounces. It's a lot of money for that much paint. Let's see if it's good. I have a ton of different tools. These are just my very favorite tools. And my very favorite brush is my old filbert brush that I've used a lot. I also like my big filbert brush, and this is all just kind of lately. It changes. Sometimes I'm in a palette mood mode. You know, I do use my liner a lot. This cut-in brush, filbert brush here, and my big filbert brush, and maybe a small liner. That's really my go-to, those 4 tools right there. And this big one is really just to paint the backdrop with the gesso. So honestly, 3 brushes. I like the blender too, but lot for landscapes. So that's mainly what I'm going to use in this video is those 3 brushes. I like this brush because it just doesn't mess around, man. It gets the job done. This paint is pretty doggone thick. Seems to be hiding really well. Let me know what's your favorite brand of paint and why, because I truly answer questions. I want to help you help me. I think this Tiki guy is going to be maybe standing in the fire, not in a fire, but like with fire around him. It's kind of why I'm doing black, is I'm setting up to maybe put in some flames or something with him. I think Tiki and fire dancing goes really well together. All right, and I'm just kind of making X's, and that's gonna give me a really interesting background with brush strokes if you see the brush strokes. As the paint dries and the water dissipates, some will show. But I like using flat paint and then coming back with epoxy as my top coat to kind of bring all that together. All right, now I'm just gonna check my edges. Now where I have those screws, they're gonna be missed. The edges are gonna be missed. I'm taking the brush and just kind of doing it. I can actually show you a really fun way to mount these skate decks. Let that dry, get some water on this. You don't want to leave acrylics on your brush without being in water for long. All right, I actually squeezed out too much of that really expensive paint. Let me see if I can't scoop that back in. Use my palette knife. Just save some of that gold here. And it went on really good. So, hey, right on. I got to decide what colors I'm going to use. So while this dries, I'm going to turn my fan on. I got a fan sitting right over there. I'll turn that up a little higher, and it'll actually expedite how fast this dries, and I can get to work. Get my jar of water here. You know, part of the problem with a lot of my art projects is just the setup. Just trying to get everything clean and ready for doing art. You guys ever spill your paint water? Yeah. An art project sometimes is like the daunting task. You hit a point where you know it takes a lot of work to make a cool piece. So you're like, man, but my advice is just start. Just get out and start. Get out and create, and you're gonna have a lot more output and a lot more productive output. And get a clean environment to work in, and you'll be happy to do it. I love being out in this little tiki hut shop. Studio, I gotta say studio. All right, got my brush cleaned. Let me take it to the sink and get it a little better because that water's gross. All right, so we'll go through my bat cave here. So this is the basement of my house, and it's built on lava, so you can see like the lava rock and everything that's holding up the beams. Crazy, right? But I got this really cool sink over here, and I'll just wash my brush out right here. This is also where I come like clean my airbrush in between colors. It's nice to have like a little mud sink right near your station. Little Bob Ross action. There we go. All right, when I'm drawing in details, I know I'm just kind of giving myself a reference here. You know, it's funny. Muhammad Ali, he said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. My kid reminded me of that quote the other day. Well, this is the plan. Like, this is where we're starting, is with, again, this sketch, and then just coming in and making sure everything makes sense composition-wise, filling him up on this board so I maximize his shape and his presence, getting his teeth right, keeping that gap, getting the wood grain in him, you know, getting the shading. I want to kind of remind myself where the light's coming from. It's coming down on him, so it's going to block these protrusions under his eyes and above his eyebrows, the bottom of his nose, the bottom of his lip. Underneath his lip will be a shadow. You know, I'm going to put some fingernails on him. I want like a tiki cartoon that has some like impressionistic, realistic looking features. You know, what expression is he giving me right here? He's like, I don't go to a lot of parties. I don't get intoxicated. My wife said he looks intoxicated, but I say he's just tired of dancing. He's been dancing all night. He's like, man, good night. It was awesome. Had a great time. This art project was so much fun. So kind of that's what he's doing here. So I spend a good amount of time just drawing him on here, getting it set up, like showing my wood grain. So when I start painting, I'll give each shape its own color in the beginning. So I know this is going to be light wood color, so I'll start there, and I'll do like brush strokes that are following that spiral. And then this cone, it'll be a different shade of the same color, but I'll keep everything and I'll paint it its own. Like this little section and this little section will be two different shades, lighter, darker, the same value. But I'll do my brush strokes in this manner. I'll come down here, kind of over here, so that I start getting that shape. The eyelid, same thing. I know that I want it to be kind of a round wooden eyelid, so it's gonna follow the shape. The nose will be a different color so that that cone separates on the nose a little bit. The lips, same thing. Teeth are gonna be this yellowish, brownish, mostly white. The teeth are gonna jump out. They're gonna be the most prominent thing that you see. So, you know, I got my plan. Let's get started. Get my paint out. I think I'm gonna use like black, white, yellow, red, and blue. I'll use the primary colors on this. I'll just use the primary colors, and we'll go from there. I'll mix up my own values. Kind of want this elbow a little bit more pointy. That arm is coming down. Water goes right here. I like to pull my easel right here so when I sit or stand, I'm not reaching over my table. It's part of the hard part of, you know, not having this easel on a tripod, but boy, is it steady and holding the board. Sometimes I'll put my surfboards attached to this thing too. I like to use my reference drawing in case I cover up any lines and I need to know where my tiki shapes are. I'm going to use the primary colors to create all of my actual tones, my mid-tones, my lights, my darks. I'm using those. I like to mix my own paint because it helps me understand color better. Now, I'm just going to put my reference photo right here and start blocking in color. None of my equipment, my brushes, my paints, nothing that I got is anything that I consider super fancy. I just go to the art store and I get kind of the mid-range products. I have noticed though, you can get better results using better tools. But this filbert brush, you know, what I found is the older the brush is, I like it even better. It gets scraggly bristles, it gets roughness, and it allows me to just continue to use this same brush. I could turn it on its side, I can hold it almost upside down or sideways, and I get different effects. So don't think that you need a bunch of equipment. I'm just using one brush for most of this entire painting, which is this filbert brush. Now I've mixed up those colors. I've gotten my different color tones, and this is the effect. Because I'm not using tube paint or a color right out of a tube, everything will start to complement one another. You see, when I mix the paint, I use a palette knife, or I just use my brush almost as a stir stick, and I don't mix it all the same shade. I move that shade across my palette to create a combination from light to dark. And all I'm really doing here is just keeping in mind where the light would be hitting and doing the light sections on the places where I believe the light would be kind of accentuating. And I'm then doing darker tones of that same tone, maybe even adding a little bit of black, just a touch to darken it up. As you start to paint, you almost become one with your character. You know, I've done a lot of landscapes, I've done a lot of different styles of paintings, but in creating this character, I really felt like I was connecting. I was smiling, he was making me happy. As I'm putting in his teeth, I'm going, man, you got some big buck teeth. You got a mouthful of choppers, man. And I was just excited to see how I could create his teeth and how I can make them look real, and how I could show that, yeah, he's wooden, but he's alive. He's a fun guy. He wants to join us. And, you know, you kind of feel a little crazy, but come on, let loose, have some fun. Enjoy your art. Enjoy what you create. And if you're just along for this video to just watch art get created, welcome. I appreciate it. Give me a comment. Let me know. Are you more interested in creating art, or are you more interested in watching art be created? I'll tell you, I love both. I love watching videos of people making cool stuff. Here, what I'm doing is just highlighting now. when I have a color on my brush, for instance, if I put in a darker tone, I'm not going to just do that one tone. I'm going to go through the painting and I'm going to add that tone everywhere that it may belong. So if I do under the lip and it's a darker tone, maybe under an eyebrow or under a nostril or in the wood grain. Don't waste that paint. And as the paint starts to dissipate off the brush, you don't need to always add more. That's actually an unlock. You can scrub that, just little hints of color in different areas. Now you're going to see that I layer paint. This is a big unlock of how I actually paint. Let me explain. What I like about going over a black canvas or a black skateboard in this instance is it takes a number of layers to actually hide that you have a dark canvas. It also adds a lot of contrast to what it is I was creating. Notice the shape I'm doing, that cone. I'm following these shapes. Remember, here I'm following the spiral. One of the secrets that really has set myself apart, where I started really loving my own art, was as I started to actually do layers. I didn't want to get that one particular thing like his arm or his eye or his head or his lips or teeth. Nothing needed to be done in one shot. I get to layer color upon color upon color. I'm not in a hurry, but what I like about acrylics is after a few moments of leaving maybe the lip or the teeth or the nose alone, it's dry, it's ready for another layer. I get to do it rather quickly. So that is how I actually get really cool results that adds a lot of depth, a lot of character, is by adding layers of color. Sometimes I start deep and work my way light. Sometimes I start light and work my way deep. I added a touch of yellow and blue, and I made it green. I added some black because I wanted almost a sepia look. I wanted to keep that grass skirt not overwhelming the painting, so I kind of kept it a little bit toned down. Now you can make a bright color and you can easily tone it down with a little bit of black. I'm putting in little hints of fingernails. See, I'm not being super particular on the defined shape yet. I know that I can always come back and re-outline my drawing, but I'm letting the light or the paint or the brush or the bristles on that brush kind of determine where the shape will end. Remember, that drawing is just a reference. This is where you start. You don't need to stay in the lines. That's actually opposite of the point of painting. Think outside the box. Think outside the lines. Just kind of be the light coming down on your painting. You know, figure out where you're going to highlight this thing. And, you know, some painters highlight at the end. I like to highlight throughout, cover up, highlight, and add that depth. And the further that I get in my painting, the more I water down my paint. Now this is a real pro tip. I use a lot of water. If I'm using oil, I use a lot of thinner. The reason I do is because I almost want to see through my paint sometimes. I don't want to add really big globs of opaque paint unless it's the beginning of the subject, if I'm really adding a lot of color. But even that, I don't want to keep too much glob because I want it to dry. I want to do the next layer. And by adding water, you get a lot of forgiveness. If I don't like something, it's actually really easy to quickly wipe it off. If you let acrylics sit too long, they'll start to dry. You can notice I've moved on to a contrast. I've moved on to a black now. Maybe not black, maybe I have a little bit of my color mixed in because I don't like to use straight white or straight black or just yellow out of the tube. I like to mix my paint, and I undermix my paint sometimes. I like sometimes a little bit of swirls. Sometimes I like having multiple colors on my brush, kind of a residual of the last color. Because what happens is you're just barely pushing on a stroke, and if you need more paint, you almost lay that brush on its side and it'll put a hint of color from your last color, adding shadow, adding realism. You know, light dances on subjects. It's not, Mother Nature hasn't created this defined blocks of color. Look at a tree or a leaf or the shading. Look at all of the different colors in one piece of nature, one human being. Look, he's got dirty teeth right now. When I've used the paint up off of my palette, when it starts to dry out, when I thinned it too much, or when the session is all done, I like to just pull that tape off, throw away that mess, and start on the next part of my painting. Now, sometimes I do the background first, which is traditional. But in this case, I wanted to put the tiki guy in and then figure out what background he was living in. I did a poll. I asked the audience, I asked you guys, hey, what should I put in? And I got a lot of great suggestions, but I chose to put in a sunset, but not just any sunset. I wanted a sunset that resembled fog, or some of the pollution you're going to get from a volcano as it's blowing out all of its gases and its liquid and its lava and magma. What happens to the sunsets is unbelievable. I live in Kona, Hawaii, and we get sometimes fog. We get, when volcanoes erupt, you get this really amazing sunset look. It's not smog, it's not fog, it's fog. And that's what I'm attempting to duplicate. Now remember, I'm in the beginning of the sunset, so I'm putting the paint on heavy. I'm hiding that black, but I'm using a combination of orange and red and yellow and white, even a little bit of brown. And I'm just looking at my reference photo, because I pulled up a photo of a Hawaii sunset, and I'm just following the best that I can of where the light would be and where the darks would be. I'm even setting myself up to put in the sun. I'm going to do a really defined sun, and then I'll fog him out a little bit. And I'm just using a cap of a spray paint can. I'm using my airbrush, and I like to highlight and I like to tone things down with the airbrush, but I'm putting a little bit of some darker brownish red around that high point, that light point, which is going to give the illusion of the sun. And then I'm putting in the fog. The brown is actually kind of the distortion that you're looking through. And look, that's what you get when you do that particular technique. I like using an airbrush to give me high and low points, things that I don't need super defined. But if I do need it defined, I like to use hard edges. You know, they make airbrush freehand templates. I learned this by watching YouTube as well. And that freehand template absolutely makes it possible to get hard edges. I'm using that white that's in my airbrush because my philosophy is the same. If I have a color, I'm going to use it. Now I switched to that dark again. I actually add some black because I want some shadow. Time for some palm trees, because you're not in the islands, you're not a tiki guy if you're not around some palms. In my property, I have a lot of palms, so I really like looking at the palm leaves. We move a lot of dead palm fronds onto our trail, so I know how to paint them because I've moved them, I've touched them. I've really gotten deep into palm fronds. I like adding the stems off center. I don't want the trunk of this tree to be perfectly straight. And this is a part where my brush, it really did some work for me. It skipped some areas. And I left it alone. I let the light on that trunk wrap around that tree. I'm putting in hints of brush and maybe flowers or something at sunset. It's a silhouette, but I didn't want a straight line going across. And now I'm just putting in what I call visual interest. I have watered down paint on the brush, and I'm just putting in some lines because I'm letting the painting kind of speak to me, what's happening behind him. Let's put in another palm tree. And I don't like to put in palm trees with like a stamped effect. I want the leaves and the fronds to all be different. I want them to be unique. I want that tree to have lived a little, gone through some wind. It's not perfect. Maybe it has a broken palm frond, maybe one hanging lower or about to fall off. You know, they go through a cycle. The real new growth is up top and the old growth kind of falls. Now I do have my liner brush out doing those palm trees, so why not use it on my tiki guy? I know I was done with him, but I went back and touched him up. This is just up close of what it looks like after I get that silhouette done. My tiki guy, he's looking happy, he's having fun, he's in the palms. What am I gonna do as the foreground? Time for my third session. Get those same primary colors out. I got a new palette. I got a drawing in because I want to create chasms. Is that how you say it? I want to create cracks and crevices. I want to create a lava land, a mystic wonder, almost a science fiction scene, because I used to love watching these types of scenes get created on PBS when I was a kid. You know, I've never been able to paint the high definition scene like I'm hoping to do here. I found a reference picture, and that's what I'm going for. Have you ever heard the expression that practice makes perfect? Well, I don't really believe that. I believe practice makes better, a little bit better. And the more that I paint, the more that I practice, the more that I let loose and have fun and get multiple colors on the brush at once, the more that I try these tips, tools, and techniques, the more that I get the work out, get the paint going, get the thing flowing, the more confidence that I build. So I saw a reference photo. I wanted to do lava fields. That was my goal. Again, I asked you, the audience, I said, what should I do as the foreground? And lava was brought up, and I wanted to take the lava fields to the next step. I wanted this rip and this tear, this crack in the earth that opens up and the lava is flowing. It's just a fresh crack. And the tiki guy, he's set back far enough to be out of harm's way, but he's almost mesmerized. He's having fun. He's actually in awe at the beauty of the lava. We took a trip the other day and we saw the lava fields out here in Hawaii, and it was absolutely mesmerizing. I couldn't believe I was looking at things that have been happening to this earth since prehistoric times. This is how this earth was created. And just seeing that brought a new awareness, almost a new appreciation for how raw and real earth is as it's being born from, for lack of a better term, within. And now we're growing. This island actually grows as the lava is created and pours out into the ocean. We add I have some yellow and white on my brush, and I'm adding highlights. Again, I'm being kind of rough and sloppy and moving fast, and I'm getting this just kind of blocked in, and then I use what paint is still not fully dry, and I blend that by adding that yellow and then coming back and adding orange and red. I look in my reference picture, and all the glow comes from below, and it becomes more red and orange as we get to the top. So I'm just looking at that photo and adding interpretations of that. I'm not trying to be perfect. Let loose. Don't try to be perfect. Now I come in and add the definitions, the defined lines. I'm using that airbrush, and I'm kind of accentuating the difference between a cliff and down there where that magma is. I gotta be honest, I had a lot of fun using that airbrush to highlight this orange in right at the cliff face. I had a lot of fun going back and forth, but I also was frustrated at times. I go, no, this isn't how I want it to look. But I just kept at it. I made mistakes. I put too much lava in right there, but I could always come back with the black and hide that lava. But by using a black, dark canvas, the lava really looks like it's glowing. I'm figuring out where the lava would be flowing through the cracks and then falling down into this big canyon. I wouldn't want to fall in there. All right, I wasn't super happy with the white, so I added more yellow. Now I wasn't happy with the yellow, and I go back, and again, the key to my painting technique is layer upon layer. If I don't like something, no problem, move on. Add that color other places, knowing it's fast. It's going to dry fast. I added that white right back, but I added the right amount of white. And I didn't panic. No need to. It's just paint. While I have the white in my airbrush, I'm going to show some suggestions of almost a tube or a canyon or the mountains. Maybe my tiki's this giant guy. Maybe he's going into a different dimension, a different world, and he's walking down and he stumbled across this phenomenon, this act of Mother Nature that he gets to be a part of. I know I sound a little crazy, but I had so much fun creating the scene. You know, I used golden paints. I used a golden paint brand for my airbrush. Was suggested that by a friend, and I really liked it. After I airbrush, I come back and I add contrast. I go airbrush, I go back to the filbert brush and back to regular acrylics, and back and forth, and this creates depth realism. It makes your painting come to life. You know, the more colors that you have per square inch, not a lot of different colors, but the same color in different shades, is what gives depth, in my opinion. And notice how little amount of paint that I'm putting on. All I have is traces of paint left on that brush, just barely touching my canvas, barely letting it touch. And sometimes I miss, I don't even touch, and that's okay. Another thing that I like to do is use my hands. I use my fingers. I finger paint a lot. If I don't like something, just rub it out a little bit. I'm masking off a couple of sections. Again, I'm using that golden paint. I like it a lot for the airbrush, but I'm masking off some sections because I want some high definition between the cliff and that lava field down deep below, and I didn't want to overspray when I did the airbrush, so that's why I did that. But I found I like the freehand template the best. I don't need to mask it off. I stopped doing that. I'm adding some highlights. Again, I'm wrapping the color around the face of the cliff. You know, I was struggling to define the cliffs because the color was similar. But how do you define it? You define it through contrast, through doing a black line, fading that out, gradient out to maybe your lighter, and then another black line is at where the shadow is because the light's being blocked by the new ridge of that canyon. So I was kind of really diving deep into this. I worked on this canyon for a long session. I didn't give up. You know, it's easy to get frustrated and think that you're not doing a good job. I suggest stand back. Go about 10 feet back and look at it, and you'll smile. You'll go, goodness, it's actually looking better than I anticipated. Right now, I'm super up close. I'm laser focused on just one line, one section, one piece of contrast. Step back and look at what that contrast does for you. It's a victory. Now what I'm doing here is just defining these hard edges. I use the airbrush, and so you're going to get some overspray on the tops of these cliffs, and the tops of these cliffs, they need to contrast. I want them dark, and I want them to overhang this bright just a little bit to give a wow, a pop, a wow factor to my painting. When a viewer comes upon it, I want them to just feel like they're going to fall off that edge if they get too close. These edges, now I get to make them pointy. I get to figure out where my definition, those faint lines back, way back in the background, I can create points to that to give the illusion that this thing is cracked all the way through. I don't want to leave it faint. I want you to be able to see because it's lit up, it's glowing. You get to see far back. All right, I'm back to the airbrush again. Like I said, I go back and forth, not trying to get everything done in one session, but trying to get hints of color and hints of contrast in each go around between the airbrush and the regular paintbrush. Every time I do a piece of art, I go through a phase where I just don't like the piece. I have to get through that block. I have to get through that phase because as you start to create, you feel like you begin to mess it up. And that's okay. I think that's natural. I think that's normal. But if you continue on, you know, I got a piece of advice from an artist that I highly respect, and he said, you're never done with a piece. Keep working it. And almost contradictory to some of the things that I believe is you got to know when to walk away. But the more detail that I put in, the more real this became to me, the more I was proud of it. I'm putting in rocks and I'm wiping away some of the paint, the watered down paint. Remember, it's watered down so I can kind of manipulate it, but I got to do it fast. And look at the traces of those rocks, the shadows. Doing the same thing back here where he's walking through this tunnel, not a tunnel, but maybe a half pipe of a giant mountain. And there's my reference photo. And guess what? It's starting to resemble something of what I was actually going for. Time for the liner brush. When I pull out the liner brush, you know I'm happy because I'm going for those tiny details. I'm done with the blocking in of color. I'm done with everything that I had been working on up to that point, and it's time for tiny amounts of detail. I love using my liner brush. I love watered down paint on my liner brush. I learned a very valuable technique in following Bob Ross's teaching, and he said roll that liner brush through the paint. Roll it. I'm doing the motion right now with my forefinger and my thumb. Just roll that brush through the paint, and when I use watered down paint, it allows me to almost use it like a pen, like an ink pen. It's just continually giving me the same consistency of fainted, toned down highlight. All right, I'm happy with the painting. I walked away. It's time for my clear coat. Of course, I'm going to use Stone Coat Epoxy, the best clear coat you can imagine for any of your art. I'm mixing at a 1-to-1 ratio for a few minutes. I'm pouring that out on a skateboard because it's not perfectly flat. I pour that down the middle, and then I simply pour a little bit on those edges, and I let gravity do its thing. I let it start to flow. I help it along with my hands. I make sure that everything was thoroughly mixed. I don't want to use any tooling. I don't want to use a trowel or anything. I don't want to scratch my artwork. But oh my goodness, what epoxy does to any painting is absolutely out of this world. It gave it so much depth, and it made me so proud of this piece of art. What do you guys think? I hope you love this painting as much as I do. Please give me a like, give me a thumbs up, comment on what you think of this video. What would you like to see in future videos? How would you like to learn more about art, more about Mike Quist art, and what kind of art would you like to create, and how can I help? Guys, I've thoroughly enjoyed creating this piece. I had so much fun. It truly brought me to my roots. It is my therapy. Paint is therapy, and the